Hello, hello. Today we're going to do a how-to tutorial on how to build a product plan or product roadmap application in Coda. If you don't want to build this from scratch, you can just go to the Coda template gallery, which is at coda.io/templates, and just do a quick search for product plan or product feature, product roadmap, sorry, and you'll see the entire template that we're going to build from scratch today. So when you click on Try Demo, you're going to see the whole thing, and this is basically the feature roadmap, product roadmap application that we're going to build that lets you track who is working on what features need to be accomplished for your launch, so on and so forth. But this template is great, but we wanted to see how we can do this from scratch so you can build your template, build your application to fit your needs and your requirements. So let's start with a blank new doc. And I'm going to channel a little bit of my Bob Ross here and say, this looks like a blank new doc. There's really not a lot here, but once you start adding your tables, your rows, your buttons, your controls, it really will start feeling like an actual application. So as Bob Ross would say, find freedom in this canvas. It's empty now, but it's going to be filled with all your ideas and all your calculations. So let's first start off by just kind of renaming this doc to be called the product roadmap. And we can also add a nice little title here, product roadmap. This is going to be like our intro section. This is our team's awesome product roadmap. So nothing crazy here. Starting off with just like a nice little friendly introduction section. But let's add another friend for this intro section. Let's add another section called people, roles, and skills. So before we build any amazing application, we need to have some underlying tables that are going to power our application. And these tables are, we have three main tables. It's going to be people, features, and resource allocation. So let's first start off with our people's table. So I'm going to create a table called people, and we're just going to call this first column people as well, role, and skills. Let me zoom in a little bit here for you. And let's first put in, this is where you would put in basically your entire team, whether it's designers, product managers, engineers, get the whole Brady Bunch gang right into this column. So I'm going to actually copy and paste from another doc here so that we can quickly fill this out. So you want to see me typing in names. So let's go here and just put a bunch of names here. And the role here is interesting. So we want to indicate whether or not they are an engineer, designer, product manager, but I don't want to write it out every single time. So I'm actually going to create a separate table called team down here. And we're going to call this column team. This is going to be called team member, let's say. And we don't need this third column like that. And we have three teams on our product team. We have engineer, designer, and we have product managers. Seems like a fun little bunch. And now we want to know who of all these people, what roles they have. So I'm going to do what we call a lookup to table. So in the role column, I'm going to click on a lookup from table, and I'm going to click on the team table here. And now you'll notice that when I select in the select list here, the three names appear, the three roles that appear are from this team column. So we can quickly now select what all these different team members do. And again, I'm just going to copy and paste all my team members' roles from a different doc so we can quickly fill this out. So now we know exactly what everyone does. Now what's really cool is I have my team name here, but let's say I want to know who all my team members are for a specific team. Well, I already know that these names listed are here, and here are their associated roles. So I can actually do a formula that finds all these names and puts them into my team member column. So we can use the lookup formula to do that here. So what I can do is write a formula where I say equals lookup. I'm going to look up to the people table, and I'm going to try to find the role that matches this row. And I believe the column I want to bring back is just the people name. Oops, that didn't exactly work out as I expected. Let's see here. People role. Oh, we have to do this. I think we have to do this row dot team. There we go. And now we can see all the individual people that are associated with a given team. So for engineers, we have Alden, Kronal, Betty, so on and so forth. And now I can quickly see who all my team members are that belong to a specific team. And finally, how do we get the skills to fill out? So I'm also, instead of having to write someone that's good at backend or front end, level 1, level 2, Sketch, Figma, I'm going to create, again, another separate table called skills. And I'm going to call this column name here. I'm going to delete these two columns for now. And I'm going to start writing in front end, back end, Sketch, Figma. And so now, when I do a lookup to the skills table here, go to skills, I'm going to check off allow multiple selections, so I can select multiple skills. So now for Alden, I can say whether or not he's good at front end, back end, level 1, level 2, so on and so forth. So it's a good way to see who on your team is good at what. What are their skills? Because you want to basically staff your team and staff your projects with the proper skill sets. I'm going to copy this from another table. So now we can quickly see all the skills for my team members. So that is our people table, along with a few kind of helper tables, if you will, for team and skills. Now let's get on to some of our more fun tables that can accompany our people. So we're going to create another section down here called features. And this is actually going to be our main table where we list out all the features that we want to build for our product. So some columns you're probably going to want to have here include feature, description of the feature that you want to build that's going to be included in your roadmap. Perhaps you might want to have a lead. This could be the person that's responsible for running that feature. And let's see if we can fill that out later. Let's see what else we want here. We might also want to have a start date, an end date. So this will indicate when the project starts and when the project ends, so we can kind of see what the timeline is for that given project. Let me zoom out here a little bit so you can see more of the columns. Let's do also a working days column. Let's do effort. What else do we have? Effort per day, and then also assignees, so we know who is actually assigned to these given features. So I'm just going to do a little bit of formatting here to make it look a little nicer. All right, so feature. What kind of features do we want to put in our product roadmap? I'm going to copy a few here from another doc. So a few things you're going to see here include building a mobile app, two-factor authentication, billing, bug bashing, GDPR, so on and so forth. And this is all just free-form text. Now, if I want to add some more descriptions to these features, let's say someone on my team we have a new engineer in the team. They need to know exactly what the feature is about. We can also put a more detailed description here. So I'm going to put a more longer text free-form description here. And for the lead, I'm going to actually ignore that column for now because we need our resource allocation table to be built out for that. So we're going to skip that table for now. For start and end date, this is going to be the column of the type date column. And this is exactly what you can imagine. These are just basically dates. And so when you change the column to a date format, it actually allows you to pick a calendar. It brings up a calendar picker. So you can pick the dates that you want kind of in a very nice calendar format. And I'm going to copy and paste these dates from another table here so you don't have to see me filling out all these individual dates. So I'm going to copy it here and put these dates, and these are just dates. Some are in the past, some are in the future. And the working days, this is probably one of my favorite formulas in Coda. If you're coming from Excel, you might also know about this formula as well, but we have a formula called net working days. And this calculates the number of business days between two different dates. So if I write net working days, and my column for my start date is going to be start, and my last column is going to be end, and I'm just going to delete the comma there. And now we know the number of days in between, number of business days between start and end date. And finally, I'm also going to ignore the effort per day, and assignees column for now, because we actually need to build out our resource allocation table in order to get that to function properly. So let's go ahead and do that. So we've accomplished two of the three main tables we need to build our product roadmap application. Let's go on and build our third and final one to make this app super awesome. So again, I'm going to create a table called resource allocation, and this table is going to be a little more meaty, a little more complicated, but I think it's going to be okay once you see the whole thing built out. So in our resource allocation table, what we want to show is the features that are being worked on, and also who is working on those features, and also what is the total effort for that given feature. In the blog post below, you're going to read a little bit more about how we talk about effort, and whether or not you use hours as a way to estimate effort or use story points, we don't care. The great thing about this template is that you can do whatever you want. You can be creative and make the effort in, I don't know, number of cookies or something. that takes. That's a silly example, but you get the idea. You can do whatever you want. So I'm going to put a few more columns here. Total effort. Let's call this percent allocation. And again, these are just columns that we have in the template. You don't have to have all these columns per se for your final product roadmap application, but some of these might help. And I'm just going to add another column here called effort per day, and let's just leave it at that for now. Oops, I want to learn how to spell here. It's a little bit early this morning. And let's go ahead and let's figure out how we're going to figure out all the features we want to put here. So remember, we already put all our features we're going to work on for our product roadmap here. Let's use this table and reuse it in this column. So we're going to do a lookup from table. Sorry, I keep on getting that wrong. I don't know why. Lookup from table features. And now all those features that we just wrote become available here. And what's really cool is that if you hover over the individual feature, you can see more about that specific feature from that original features table. So I'm going to again copy and paste all my features from another doc so you don't have to see me type. And this is going to be a lot, but let's go here. And now we have all our different features that are selected. And we also want to know the role that this is being worked on, because this is going to help us look at some visualizations of our resource allocation. So I'm going to do a lookup from table again to our, let's see, I believe it's team. That's right. So we can pick our engineer, designer, product manager, so we know which of our teams rather is working on that specific feature. And I'm going to copy this again from another document. Let's go here. So now we have the specific teams or roles that are working on that feature. And then also we have to select the person that's going to be working on that specific feature. Now what's really great is, since we know that we have all these individual team members that belong to a specific team, and since we already have this team brought into this column, we can actually reference this column in future formulas. So for assignee, I'm not going to create a select list of every single team member. I'm actually going to create a select list that just shows role.people. I think that should work, I believe. And so now, whoops, I didn't actually have to make that a formula, equals. Whoops, did a little bit of craziness right there. Sorry about that. I'm going to, let's delete this right here, equals role, which references this column right here, and then type in people. I believe it's people, or is it something else? I think it's people. And let's see, oh, I don't think that was actually the right, let's see what the column actually is called. It is called team member, okay. Let's go back here. Let's change this column to, yep, didn't recognize that reference. Let's call this team member. Huh, didn't really like that. All right, well, you know what, for now, we're just going to, actually, let's see, we should have figured that out. Team, okay, well, we'll look into that. That should have just automatically pulled in this this column, but we can skip this for now. And what we're going to do is just make this a lookup to table. We're going to go to our people column, and now we can basically select all our team members for now. But there is a way we can make this so it's only filtered down to just the team members that are for a specific team. So I'm going to go ahead and just kind of select a bunch of people here. And sorry, I didn't actually have a copy of this for now, so I'm just going to, I'm just going to quickly copy this a few times down so you don't have to see me reselect all this stuff. All right, the effort. This is the fun part of trying to figure out how much effort you want to assign for a given feature. Now again, we don't know if you want to use story points or hours. We're just going to put a generic number here for now. And we can have that represent hours or story points or whatever you want. I'm going to change this back to a number for now. All right, so now we have kind of like an estimation of how much effort that specific feature will take. And now we're actually going to bounce back to our features table because now we know what the individual effort that each of these assignees on our team members is going to do for these features. So we can actually go back to our features table and we can find out the total effort associated with a given feature since we know from the bottoms up what how much effort individual team members are working on. So if I do resource allocation dot filter where the feature equals this row, and then I find the effort column that we just filled out, and then also find a sum. That didn't seem to like that for some reason. Let's actually just double check that it was the effort. Yep, okay. Let's see what happened here. Feature this row, okay. Yeah, that should have worked right off the bat. Let's try this again. Sometimes you just jiggle this a few times. Filter where the feature equals this row dot feature. Let's try that. That might be the trick here. Dot sum. There we go. So now we have the total effort associated with these different features. And what's interesting here is that this effort is just we're basically doing kind of a sum if in Excel, and we're doing it all right here so that it shows exactly what the effort is. And now if we do effort divided by working days, just take this column right here divided by that column, we can now see the total effort that is going to be taking place per day for the specific feature, which looks a little nicer in my opinion. And finally, we want to know who's going to be working on these individual features. So let's do a lookup for, let's see, resource allocation, where the feature equals this row dot feature. And we want to just pull back the assignee, which we also filled out. And now we know exactly who is working on all these different features. So again, this is pulled, these last three columns we just did right here are being pulled from the resource allocation table, which helps us figure out, again, who is working on what and how much effort they are going to be working on. Okay, so, I just realized we want to change this back to a lookup from table, and I think that's the reason why, that's the reason why that original format didn't work. So if I change this back to a lookup, change this to also a lookup, I think when I copied and pasted, it kind of changed things a little bit. So that's probably the reason why it didn't work so well. Okay, all right, here we go. All right, that's what happens when you do these live demos. You never know how things are going to pan out when you're doing it live. So this is how it's actually going to work. There we go. So that's why we didn't have to actually do this row dot feature, this row dot the column. All right. You learn things every day when you try to do things live, and it's almost like when you're painting a painting, right, Bob? All right. All right, I'm losing my mind here, guys. Don't worry, we're almost done. Okay, so we have effort. Now, what's really cool is that we have these individual features with all these different efforts built out from the resource allocation table. If I go back to the resource allocation table, I can actually say feature dot effort, and this is actually taking the effort column from the features table, not from this table, because we have this feature as a lookup to the features table. If I press enter here, it brings back the total number. So now we kind of have an idea of what the total effort is from an individual person's perspective. So if we know Alden is working on growth features, his effort is going to be 50 story points, and the total effort for the entire feature is actually 50 as well. But for Bug Bash, Kunal is doing effort. He has an effort of 50. The total effort is 240. And so now we can actually do a really cool thing of saying, let's actually do a round, excuse me. If we do effort divided by total effort, and we do a comma 2, we can see how much this person is being allocated to a specific feature. So whether that person is 100% allocated, 20%, this is a really useful calculation to have. And start and end date, as you can imagine, we can also pull this from the feature column because we have that as one of our columns in the start. And we can also do the same thing for feature.end. Working days, I believe, we can also pull that straight from the features table as well. Working days, this is great. And effort per day, that's also, we're kind of doing a little bit of duplication here, but I always like to have more data than not in my master tables because you can always hide these tables, hide the columns, which we're going to do which we're going to do quite a bit in our actual views. So we just did all this work and it's going to pay off, I promise you. We have people, feature, resource allocation, and now we can actually start building some really cool views off of our table, off of our tables for resource allocation, features, and people. So a general rule of thumb is I like to add a folder with all my kind of data so that I can tell my team members, hey, this is kind of like a special folder that contains all of our master data. And so it kind of prevents them from going there and editing the master tables. But for me, if I'm the project manager, I can always go in here and play around with the tables as necessary. So let's actually start looking at our data in some cool ways. Let's build a section called the feature roadmap. We are building a product roadmap here after all, so we kind of want to see how things are going. So let's call this feature roadmap. And let's create a view off of our main features table. And I don't want to see all this stuff. This is, again, a view of our master table. I'm just going to call this main features. I'm going to hide a bunch of columns so that I only see feature description, let's see, working, I don't want to see all this stuff. I only want to see literally the feature description, start, end date, and I'm going to hide this count. And this gives me a nice summary view of all the different features we want to build out in our product roadmap. And what's also great is, let's say I want to look at a timeline of my features. I'm going to go here, click on a plus here and go to the chart, create a Gantt chart. And this is how we can see a timeline of all the features we're working on. How beautiful is that? A nice little waterfall with some trees and some rivers. Not really, I'm just, again, channeling my Bob Ross here. But what's really great is if I change one of these columns or change one of these, drag one of these timelines in the Gantt chart, you'll notice that it also changes the start and end date up here. So everything is connected. This is a much more visual representation, and when I hover over a specific feature, I can see more specifics about that feature from the actual feature table. So we have now a feature roadmap. Let's look at a way to assign work. Now this is going to be a little more interesting to see because we want to be able to know who is working on what, and we can pick a role for what that feature, who that we can pick a role for that specific feature's development. So this time I'm going to use the resource allocation, excuse me, the resource allocation table as our view. So I'm going to go to table, go to a view of resource allocation. And this time I'm going to hide the title just for sake and purposes of making this a little cleaner. I'm going to group by the feature column. So now I can quickly see all the different features in one glance, kind of like a pivot table in Excel. And I'm going to hide a few columns here. I'm just going to hide the effort. Actually, I actually want to keep the effort. I want to hide the total effort for now. Hide the total effort. I want to keep the start and end date. I want the assignee. And I think let's just keep it like that. Actually, we'll hide. This is like a nice little view. I want to know who is working on what. I'll hide that percent allocation, effort per day, and move the effort over here. And all this stuff I'm doing to change this view won't affect the master data table unless I'm changing a specific value. If I change this to 50, this will also change it everywhere else in my doc. So this is a nice little table to have. So this allows me, if I want to perhaps assign, Alden to this feature, this is where I can do all that here in this nice little view of my resource allocation. So this is all nice and dandy, but let's actually start looking at some really cool visualizations. And this is going to give you much more insight into who is working on what, and you can get it at a glance of an eye. So let's look at resource allocation. Let's call this allocation by person. And I'm going to insert a chart this time. I'm going to do a bar chart of the, let's see here, the resource allocation table, right? And let's do workload by person. And let's change some of this stuff here. So we want the horizontal axis to be assignee. And we want the, let's see what else we want here. We want the values to be effort, that's right. And we want the segment to be by feature. And now, actually, we also want to lay this out so it is stacked. There we go. And now we can see some of the people that are working on all our different, how much effort individual people are working on specific tasks. And I like this view because now you can kind of see how much Jason is working on something, how much Alden is working on something, so on and so forth. Actually, let's see if we can get some more people to show up here. Let's see here. Yep, well, I think this is actually a pretty good view. I'm not sure why other people aren't showing up. I think it might be a certain way that we're filtering on this for now. But the idea here is that if I click on a specific feature, it will actually remove that from the graph. So now let's say I only want to see who people are working on billing integration. It's just these 3 people, and I can see their effort associated with a specific feature. So this is a really nice little view of the data to see what people are working on. And this is all, we can get all this through the bar chart visualization. Okay, and let's look at another way we can look at this resource allocation utilization by person. Let's say we want to look at their people are working on by the by people. And instead of grouping by feature, I'm going to do this is going to be allocation, I can't type today, by person table. And if I group along the assignee, this is a nice visualization because I still have that kind of nice table layout, but I also get to see kind of what people are working on also from a total effort perspective. And if I hide a bunch of these columns, now I can see where people are working on and also the associated effort. And I can also throw in the start and end dates here if I wanted to. But this is also a nice view of our resource allocation table. But probably one of my most favorite views for looking at resource allocation is the Gantt chart, which we looked at earlier for our features. And this time we're going to do a Gantt chart, but we're going to filter it down to the people. So this is right here is just of our resource allocation. This is the default view. But in order to make this more useful, I'm going to move the assignee over here to the left and make this a group. And then I'm also going to, let's see here, move the feature as a group. And now let's see what happens when I change this back to a chart. Yeah, there we go. What's really awesome is that I can now get a timeline of, so I only had 3 team members that are working on features. I can now look at a timeline of when Alden, Quinal, and Jason are working on different features. And more importantly, if I click down into a specific person, I can actually see now all the features they're working on, how that is being stacked for their specific project. And this is a really nice bird's eye view to see kind of like almost swim lanes of what people are working on, which is kind of neat. But it's filtered, but it's kind of cut by the person instead of by the feature, which is really nice. All right, so let's look at one more way to visualize our allocation. Let's look at allocation by feature. So this is going to be very similar to what we just did, but by feature. So if I do resource allocation, and I'm going to group by feature this time instead. And then the opposite, I'm going to group by assignee secondly. And if I change this to a chart of a Gantt chart, now it's basically the opposite of what we just saw. Another way to look at your resource allocation is to see, okay, here are all the features we're working on, but let's now look at who is working underneath that feature and what their kind of timeline looks like. So again, it's the same, very, very similar view as this, but just by feature at the top level and then person, versus in this one, it's person and then feature. So I like this one because I still want to get that feature timeline, but instead I want to see how individual people are stacked in terms of work and effort below that feature. And finally, a nice bird's eye view that you can also see is allocation by team. So we know all the individual people that are working on these features, but sometimes we want to just see overall who is working on the total effort. The team level effort. So if I do a team insert a view of the team here, so we know the individual team members that are working on all these different things, but let's say I want to figure out the total effort by team. I'm going to put something here called total effort, average effort per person. And just to reiterate here, I created a view, I'm going to call this view a workload by team table. This is a view actually off of our, let's see here, team table. When I added those 2 columns right here, total effort and average effort per person, it actually added it to my master table right here, but they're hidden by default, so if I unhide them, you're going to see them show up here. But I don't want them to show up in my team table in my data section, data folder, so I'm going to keep them over here. So the way I'm going to find total effort is resource allocation.filter, where the role equals this row, and .effort .sum. You may have seen this calculation before already. And also the average effort per person is going to be total effort, which is what we just calculated, divided by team member column .count. So we're counting the number of people in that team member column. And now we can kind of see the average effort, if you will, for the that team. So this is a really cool way to see at a team level what people are working on. But now, if I change this into a chart, actually, if I go down here and I do a view, a chart rather, let's do a bar chart of our, what did we just do, the team. And now I can kind of see what people are, what the whole effort is by team. I'm going to change this to a stacked let's see if I can change this to a horizontal. I like the horizontal one for this use case. And now this is a workload by team chart. And now you kind of see basically our engineering team is basically way overstaffed and working a ton on our project versus designers and the product managers. And this is, again, just built off of this table that we just made. And you can also change this to, let's say, to the average effort per person. So now we still see that engineers on a per person basis are still being worked a lot. So that's just another interesting visualization you can see for your resource allocation. So hopefully this is a nice little application that you can build from scratch, or you can use a template, but hopefully you can see how powerful that Coda is for helping you build a specific feature roadmap or product plan, and also how you can visualize your product plan with charts and with Gantt charts, so on and so forth, as long as you have created these 3 master tables right here. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I know it's a bit long, and I'm hoping to do more of these in the future. And thank you for following, and looking forward to seeing what you build in Coda.